Welcome to Brownish Parenting with Dr. Amita. This space explores the messy, meaningful realities of raising our South Asian American children. I'm your host, Dr. Amita. I am an adjunct professor at San Jose State University in the Department of Child and Adolescent Development. I am also the founder of Social Edge. Today's episode is going to dive into a topic that quietly shapes many of our homes and dinner table conversations. It's about toxic achievement culture. If you're a South Asian parent or you grew up in a South Asian household, you know that pressure to succeed isn't just intense, it is generational. And so when we think about the college admission process, we think about those high GPAs we expect from our children, the national rankings that show up in our conversations. Sometimes it feels like our kids' worth is measured by their GPAs and their resume instead of their joy and the growth that we want to see in them. So when we think about the cost, we are seeing a lot more anxiety, a lot more depression, and burnout, and it's more so than ever before. And it's not just about the academic load, but it's also thinking about something called the mattering deficit. So this is a concept that Jennifer Wallace explains in her book, Never Enough. And it is at the root of this mental health crisis that we're seeing today because children are wondering, do I matter for who I am or only for what I do and what I accomplish? And so that's where this conversation is going to begin today. We want to talk about the long game and how we can really raise children who are thriving emotionally and they're grounded even in high pressure environments without losing sight of who they are or who they hope to be in the future. So before our conversation today, I wanted to share a few key insights from this book, Never Enough by Jennifer Wallace, who's an award-winning journalist and a huge advocate for parenting, education, and mental health. And so in this book, she looks at this culture of toxic achievement, especially among high performing teens and their families, and looks at this pressure to succeed, whether it's academic, social, professional, and how that really does come at a cost to one's mental health, their identity, and the joy that they get to experience in their lives. So, some of those key insights are the first one would be achievement is not the same as worth. Many kids are internalizing this idea that they're only as good as their last grade, right? On their report card or their last test score or the last trophy that they got. So we want to have more conversations with them about this and not just show pride only when they achieve certain something. When we look at the second concept, it's this importance of mattering. So, what is mattering? Well, teens need to feel like they're really valued for who they are at their core, not just again what they're accomplishing. So, really noticing that when they're kind, when they're showing empathy, the values that they're living by. Now, the third point is this idea of a hidden tool. So, these high expectations as parents have, even though they feel like, hey, they're well intentioned, I just have high expectations because I know they can achieve, it can lead to anxiety, burnout, and disconnection. So, especially when kids feel like they can never stop striving to impress their parents. So, you can imagine how much burnout can happen and how disconnected a child can feel from their parents when they feel like they're never happy with what they do. Now, the fourth point that they make is that it's a systems issue. It's not just about parenting, but it's also about the environment they're in their schools, with their peers, the communities. When you think about the South Asian American community and the pressure that's put on them to try to be these good model minorities. And so when this culture defines success too narrowly, that's what can happen. So I want us today to just kind of take a deep breath and really, really think about how our conversation today is not going to be about lowering the bar. It's about redefining what success looks like to our children, within our families and how we can protect their mental health. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we are going to talk to Arun Ponnusamy, who has extensive experience with the college admissions and counseling process. He is a fierce advocate for healthier parent-child relationships and someone who has really seen toxic achievement culture up close, especially when working with South Asian families. Welcome, Arun. I'm so excited to have you on the show. And so, what I wanted to start with is, my son's a junior. He's 17 years old right now, and he is going to be applying to colleges in the fall. And so, I can't
He's
even
a
tell you.
senior. He's a senior.
Yes, I can't say it right now, but yes, he's a senior. And so this conversation comes at the most opportune time for me, right? And I wanted to also just, you being a South Asian male, like I haven't seen, like I'm going down this whole college counseling sort of route. I haven't seen a South Asian male as a model, and I just feel like your story is so interesting, and I'd love to hear a little bit more about how you first got into this work.
Oh, well, first of all,
Yeah,
Dr. Shaw, thank you so much for
yeah.
having me on. It's kind of incredible the audience you have. These are some of my
Hmm.
favorite people to talk to, my people. So I'm
Yeah.
really appreciative of the time and energy you put into sharing great information with everyone. My own path here, I mean, no one grows up in rural Ohio in the 80s as,
Hmm.
the one brown kid surrounded
Yeah.
by white people in cornfields
Yeah.
thinking they're going to become a college counselor, right? And it was like not unlike many of my peers. It was kind of like, oh, it's going to be medicine, maybe it'll be banking.
Yeah.
I think everyone understood my math aptitude wasn't going to, carry me
Mhm.
into engineering per se. And
Yeah.
through a series of kind of happy accidents as I was putting off graduate school at the end of undergrad. I had studied anthropology. I had some vision of perhaps continuing to pursue that. My inspiration for going to the University of Chicago was
Hmm.
Indiana Jones was based on a professor
Ooh.
from there. Pretty
Yeah.
terrible way to pick your college, by the way. There's a certain irony to me being a college counselor and
Yeah.
putting so little
Wow.
thought into
Uh-huh.
where I wanted to go. But I ended up, I'd been a student tour guide, and
Hmm.
a couple happy accidents later, I was encouraged to apply by the director of admissions for, a junior admissions opportunity, and I just found the work fascinating. I mean, it actually
Yeah.
became an extension of my like anthropological studies in so many ways, and I ended up after my time in Chicago and Caltech,
Hmm.
UCLA, which those are the kinds of schools where you spend the vast majority of your time
Yeah.
recruiting, 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 and then
Hmm.
rejecting 90% of the students who
Wow.
applied, right? And
Hmm.
it didn't quite feel like my vibe. I kind of like the idea of, gosh, what could I do to help clear pathways, open up paths that maybe students don't even see in front of them. And that's how I ended up becoming an education consultant, which I've now been doing for, yeah, 20 years. And yes,
Great.
there's only a handful of us brown guys in the profession, and
Yeah.
it is very funny when we're in the same room. Okay, once a year at these annual conferences, there's a lot
Yeah.
of fist bumps and hugs and just like, bro, this is
Oh,
great.
that's great.
But
Yeah. And if you think about it, yeah, because you had kind of went down this journey of not knowing what you wanted to do. So there were like these sort of pain points for you. And then getting that experience that you had as a tour guide, kind of
yep.
putting you in, um, putting it all together and thinking about how then once you started helping people, it probably all just came together, right? Like all the pain points that you had and
Yeah,
experiences.
at that young age, being an admissions officer is pretty fun as well. I had
Yes.
an incredible time at Chicago. They gave me a credit card. They said, go travel, talk
Yeah.
about the incredible experience you have, and encourage other students, teenagers, to
Mhm.
think about whether this might be a good place for them. So it was actually a
Yeah.
ton of fun. It was incredibly hard work. It was long, monotonous. Chicago,
Yeah.
the sun sets at like 2 in the afternoon in
Yeah.
January, February, and you're reading applications for
Gosh.
weeks on end.
Uh-huh.
But I found it fascinating with the way people express themselves. And, at a more personal level, when you're the junior admissions officer, you're not given Hawaii. At the
Yeah.
end, I had Hawaii, and that was awesome. But at the beginning, I was given the Chicago suburbs, which are filled with
Mhm.
loads of Indians and South Asians, right?
Yes.
And, we can't take every kid with great grades and a great test score who's active.
Mhm.
That's just the nature of math and highly selective universities. And
Yeah.
it was a little dismaying for me. Like,
Mhm.
this is in the same night, this is the seventh girl from this suburb who does Bharatanatyam and plays tennis, right?
Wow. Yeah.
And you're like, the grades are great, they're honest, they're earnest.
Mhm.
Um, but we're building a class here. There's a
Yeah.
community we're building, and we can't build an entire class out of kids who do the exact same thing and want to go on to study the exact same thing and
Yes.
pursue the exact same career, right?
Yes.
And so that was part of when kind of, came to the other side, the
Yes.
dark side, as some people in the
Yes.
admission side would call it. So much of the joy was being able to say, like, hey, you don't have to be pre-med. Law school isn't the only path, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it was as much educating the young people, as much as it was educating the young
Hmm.
people, it was also educating the parents, for really,
Uh-huh.
pretty obvious reasons, being, immigrants or, products of pressure themselves, were kind of
Yes.
like, reflecting that and encouraging that in their
Yes.
own kids.
Yes. That's so
So it's
interesting.
been a long time
Mhm.
kind of breaking down these myths over the years.
Yes, because it sounds like, yeah, you saw sort of with working with South Asian families, you saw the standard profile of South Asians pursuing those STEM careers, GPAs, certain maybe extracurricular activities that were very specific to the South Asian population.
Well, but what would be
Yeah.
wild was, the
Yeah.
kid would be editor of their school paper, editor
Uh-huh.
of their literary journal,
Yeah.
and they'd be a phenomenal poet. And then when you look at what they want to major in, it's biology, chemistry,
Mm,
biochemistry,
yeah.
career interests, medicine.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you're like, is there not a possibility
Uh-huh.
that you could become the next great novelist? I mean, and the irony being, of course, places like India and Pakistan and Sri Lanka
Yeah.
have an incredibly rich history of
They
literature,
do.
but somehow South Asians in the US couldn't
In the
convert
US
their
specifically.
child.
Yes.
I mean,
Yes.
now I think that's changed, obviously, right? But
That's true. That's true.
a little bit, a little bit.
Yeah. And I am hearing about like kind of you spoke to this whole idea of a well-rounded student is what we kind of grew up with this myth of, but now the colleges are looking for a well-rounded college. So that student that's majoring in poetry is gonna, you know, be someone that the colleges want maybe more than
Right.
another student that's in bio and has
Yeah,
a GPA. Right.
absolutely. And I see that, like, that
Mhm.
myth kind of persists, unfortunately,
Yeah.
where, parents are like, he needs to add a sport. Tell him what sport he should do. And it's like, it's okay. It's not really about sports.
Yeah.
I mean, I think both of us would place a
Mhm.
huge emphasis on physical fitness
Oh,
and,
totally. Yeah.
mental wellness, physical wellness.
Mhm.
But so much about sports
Yeah.
is really about the ability to collaborate. It's about
Mhm.
performing under pressure.
Yeah.
It's about the ability to lose, to
Mhm.
fail, to not things have work out,
Yeah.
and to be able to move on and move forward, right? It can be slightly horrifying.
Hmm.
Some South Asian kids who have just been insulated from
Yeah.
failure, what
Yeah.
happens when their first person to say no to them or their first rejection is a college admissions letter?
Yeah.
That's the parents' fault. I'm very direct about that.
That is so true. Yes. And we're going to take a break right now because I'd love to just kind of dive in deeper into some of those obstacles and challenges that you're seeing. Welcome back. We're now going to take a look at high achieving teens, look at achievement, pressure, burnout, all of that. But to start off with, I first want to just address my high achieving teens that maybe highly motivated to go to an Ivy League, and what would the right reasons be to want to go to an Ivy League? Yeah, what do you think?
Well, it sounds funny, and I'm not
Mhm.
evading your question here, but I'll take it a step back
Yeah.
because I think critical to any student who wants to be successful in the admissions process
Uh-huh.
and is thinking about highly selective universities, Ivy League, and schools of that sort, they actually, it's less about why do you want to go to Harvard or Duke or
Hmm.
Northwestern or Chicago. A lot of it actually starts with why do you want to go to college? Because as I
Okay.
look at my
Yeah.
students each year, and I've been
Hmm.
doing this for 20 years, so I feel pretty confident
Yeah. Yeah.
with my thinking around this, my advice around this.
Uh-huh.
I look at my students who are most successful in this process, the
Hmm.
ones who are getting multiple offers, the ones who went through the process with a bit of a smile on their face, maybe even some
Yeah.
joy.
Hmm.
And it happens not often, a lot, right? These aren't exceptions to the rule. Those students who have given thought to why they want to go to college and have a clear fundamental understanding of here's what a 4-year university experience is going to be like for me. I'm incredibly excited about the idea of research. Last summer I had the
Mm.
opportunity to work in this biology lab, and
Yeah.
oh my God, getting to test ideas, have them struck down, being forced to support them, the collaborative efforts that went on as I worked with those graduate students and the professors. They're almost like breathing fires. They get
Yes,
excited about
yes.
it. And then, gosh, in that sense, highly selective universities, they don't
Mhm,
have a monopoly on this, but
mhm.
they are very well regarded for the opportunities that they create for their students in terms of undergraduate research, right?
Mhm.
Whether it's linking you up with professors, graduate students, the funding, the
Yeah.
opportunities to, work with great, facilities and
Mhm.
technology. So, there's that version of the kid who is super excited about research.
Yes.
There's the
Yes.
kid who is I've always been I've had lemonade stands since I was 4 years old.
Mhm.
That entrepreneurial mindset,
Mhm.
that's what gets me geeked out more than anything else. Like other
Yeah.
people can do real estate, other people can go iBanking or do management
Yeah.
consulting. I'm excited about entrepreneurship. And then
Mhm.
boom, that starts clicking in their mind of like, wow, Stanford really harbors a culture that encourages
Yeah.
that, Wharton School of Business, Stern,
Mm.
having that kind of understanding of why you want to go to college, really dialing down on the specific study abroad, a large international population so you can meet people who are different from you, whatever the case
Yeah.
might be, putting together that list of 3, 4, 10 things,
Yeah.
then you get to map that out against those highly selective schools. And then what I found is it becomes so much more organic for those kids to get in. The kids who are excited about
Yeah.
research, the kids who want to hang out with other kids who want to
Mhm.
write 12th century iambic pentameter until 3 in the morning. When they have that sense of, I want to be
Yeah.
around these
Yeah.
people,
Yeah.
then they have the reason to apply to Dartmouth, to apply to Pomona
Uh,
and, Amherst and places like that. The kids who start off with US News and World Report has this ranked that I want
the
to go to a
rankings.
top
Yes.
10 school, a
Uh-huh.
top 25 school. That's where it falls apart. Then you're reverse engineering things. You're trying to fit
Yes.
square pegs into round holes. So much better to start with why college as opposed to why these specific schools.
That's great. 'Cause I don't think a lot of South Asian parents are having even that conversation about why college because it's assumed you're going to college and it becomes a checklist. It becomes like, well, I have to go to college. And you get there and you're just there to finish college.
Yep.
It's not
Yep.
like this
And
experience that you just talked about.
yeah, and I mentioned,
Yeah.
how it connects to my anthropology.
Yeah.
So much of what I study in anthropology was around ritual. And,
Hmm.
we don't have this monolithic like religion or even culture in the United States.
Yeah.
But boy, amongst middle class, upper middle class families,
Yeah.
who have teenagers, the college application process is the
Yeah.
closest we have to a universal ritual. And it's just this like, well, it's like my Jewish students. And like, well, bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
There's that version going on where I ask kids, why do you want to go to college? And they're just like, well, I'm going to be 18. I don't want to join the military. I don't want to get a job. My parents said I can't live in the basement anymore. I
Exactly.
guess I'll go to college. That is so different than having
Yes.
clear, purposeful reasons for going. And so we shouldn't just assume, even as I do my work, particularly with
Hmm.
younger students, I don't assume that they're going to college. I want the path.
Yeah.
I'm a strong believer, a
Yeah.
firm believer
Yeah.
in the transformative power of a 4 year residential college experience. But I also know that it's not for everyone. And I want kids to find their own way of getting there rather than,
Yeah.
well, your brothers and sisters did it and your parents did it and all your aunts and uncles. So of course you're going to college.
Yeah, yeah. And I think because they're South Asians are so burnt out with the amount of effort they're putting into their, because, my son just took all his AP exams, they're in SAT courses. It's so hard to figure out how to give them that experience that
Hmm.
they need to figure out what they actually like or want to do. And they're so limited in their high school experience with the classes that
Yep.
they have to take to then be able to get to that next step, which is that whole college application process.
Right.
So I guess I'm wondering, and like, I'm wondering what you think of the gap year in general. So there's the gap year. There's also, like, as you're talking, I'm thinking about a lot of students that think about community college route because
Mhm.
maybe their goal is to graduate from Berkeley, maybe because of a program. Hopefully, it's not just because of that name
Yeah.
of UC Berkeley. Okay,
Yeah.
so as we're just
Berkeley's
kind
a pretty cool
of
place,
weaving,
but yeah.
yeah, weaving in, what we talked about. Like they know this is like their end goal, and maybe this is another route to get there. There's just so many avenues that you can take, and so what, like, besides having that conversation about why college, let's say there's a child that's stuck, they're probably going to go undeclared to college. They don't
Yeah.
know, right?
Yeah,
They're
yeah, yeah. Well, I'll start off with this
yeah,
question of the gap year.
yeah.
I actually used to have up to about a third of my students took gap years. I highly encouraged it.
Hmm.
All the data shows us that students who go off on gap years,
Yeah.
um, return to college more focused.
Mm.
They have higher GPAs. They pick their majors sooner, and they find stronger career paths, stronger career outcomes, right? I've often joked that if I could change one thing
Yeah.
about the American university system, if I could just wave a wand,
Uh-huh.
I would have girls start college at 21 and boys start at 25, right? National Reserve, I'd have them burn off that
Uh-huh.
energy, find some focus.
Uh-huh.
I will say, post-pandemic,
Hmm.
it has been a harder sell. I understand a lot of kids are just like, middle school is weird, high school is weird. Don't put me another year behind my
Yeah.
classmates.
Yeah.
But I do see a slow rebound
Hmm.
last 2 years. Gap years, all the data tells us they're incredible for
Okay. Yeah.
students.
Yeah. I
So
do.
it is something that should highly be considered. I think community college, just other pathways also have to be weighed alongside,
Hmm.
right? You mentioned Berkeley. It is to the shock of parent, I will
Hmm.
have parents who are like, tell me what it takes to get into Berkeley. I will have my kid do it. I'm like, truthfully, you don't have to do if you're
Yeah.
that strategic, you don't have to do anything in high school. You
Hmm.
can let your kid turn 18, enter a California community college, and have them crush it there, and they will be off to Berkeley. And they were like, well, I didn't mean that. I was like,
Yeah.
you told me Berkeley at all costs. It
Yeah.
sounds like you wanted something different, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the community college system in California is incredible.
Hmm.
I do think again, I'm very data driven. I do know that the dropout rates are higher at community colleges. The support systems
Hmm.
aren't always there, so I think a kid does have to go in very intentionally. But for the kind of focused kid who maybe didn't have the college,
Yeah.
high school experience academically that they hoped for, they still want some time to explore. Community college is incredible, and I also think speaking to your point around major. Um, I think there can be incredible
Hmm.
value for kids who are like, I know I want to do this when I get to college, if they have clear reasons for why.
Yeah.
But it's also worth noting that, like the University of California system, almost
Hmm.
all these research universities, particularly if you stick with the arts and sciences program, they have core curriculums, they have general
Hmm.
education requirements, they have academic advisors and major advisors in your major or concentration.
Yeah.
They'll help guide you as well. So it's not a case where it's very different than India
Yeah.
and Hong Kong and Singapore, where day one, you know what you want to study and you've
Hmm.
got to lock in on it, right? Irony being the Cal States are a little bit that way, where you do have
Hmm.
to know. And even places like Wharton and Stern, you have to pick
Yeah.
business. If you go to Georgetown and the School of Foreign Service, well, you're kind of committing yourself to that
Yeah.
academically and probably professionally, right? You don't
Yeah.
go to
Yeah.
this Tisch School for the Arts and not have some interest in going into theater, right? So
Hmm.
there are
Yeah.
exceptions, but by and large, it is okay to be undecided. But there's a huge difference between, oh, I don't know, versus,
Yeah.
I don't know, I love physics, I love poetry, I love philosophy. It would be very cool to take part of the core curriculum that Columbia and Chicago offer, and then I'll figure it out. So
Yes.
you have some
Yes.
level of intent and
Uh-huh.
focus and kind of an identified path to move forward, but it's okay to be undecided.
Yeah, yeah, I like that. I like just having this idea, being curious, getting exposure, figuring out different fields, talking about it like with your family, especially the ones that are the unconventional careers that we're not really exposed to that much, because that's the only way we're going to learn about them. Yeah.
Yes,
All right,
yes,
we're going
yes.
to take a break. And when we come back, I'd love to talk a little bit more about how we can get parents to think about these topics a little differently and maybe talk through a couple of like, strategies. All right, welcome back. I wanted to talk a little bit more about this idea of playing the long game when it comes to college admissions. And I know you mentioned that at a conference. I wanted just to hear a little bit more from you about what that meant.
Yeah, I think it's very easy for students and families to get kind of caught up with just getting in. What does it take to get into this
Exactly.
college,
Yeah.
right? And I am that college counselor where a student calls me like, Arun, thank you so much for helping me get into Princeton. And then I turn around and I'm like, that's amazing. I'm so happy for you. And then 90 seconds later, I'm also like, yo, if this is the most interesting thing you do in your life, you're doing it wrong. I
Yeah.
would be
Yeah.
disappointed in you. Oh, but it is a failure to kind of understand that college is only one stop on what is hopefully a
Mm,
much longer, richer journey.
yeah.
And so when we talk about the long game, it's also kind of, we talked a little bit about career paths, right?
Hmm.
That can be something, but it also can be like that continuation of, how are you looking to make your community, the world, a better place, right?
Yeah.
And for some students, they're directly going to commit themselves to I really want to work on this homelessness issue professionally. For others, it's
Hmm.
going to be like, you know what? I'm going to make a ton of money and I want to influence policy. And I'm going to make sure that I'm the kind of person that senators and congressmen and women call up and go, hey, I'd like your advice on what we should do around this homelessness issue, right?
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
want kids to start building this longer view of themselves, often what I call
Mm,
having a vision for
yeah.
yourself. And I think in an ideal world, when the work between me and a student is going
Hmm.
well, they're developing a sense of who they are now,
Yeah.
which I think is very important. That's a little bit of why do you want to go to college?
Hmm.
Um, and also developing a sense of who do you want to become, right? And that isn't a profession, right? But
Yeah.
that's like, I want to become a more ethical person. I want to become a more loving person. I want to become
Hmm.
a better listener. It's values, it's traits, it's characteristics, and then start building towards that. And undergraduate will be one part of it, and perhaps having a family will be a part of it, but all of it is
Yeah.
building up to this bigger vision of who you are. And so I don't ever want a kid to pursue this
Hmm.
process with just getting in as being the only goal. That's not as organic and authentic
Yeah.
as I want it to be. And honestly, it's not as successful. The outcomes aren't as high, right? I often joke there are the families that come to me and they're like,
Hmm.
Arun, tell me what it takes to get MIT and I will do it. You
Yeah.
know, tell me what my child should do, and I will make sure they do that to get into Hopkins.
Hmm.
And I cringe because I know that it's just not going to work out that
And
way.
it's not
Oh,
sustainable. Like I know I took this I think it was Yale's Science of Happiness course, and they were offering that because
mhm.
students were getting to Yale and they were, working at it. They were like, yes, I'll be so happy when I get to Yale. They get there and then they're completely burnt out. They have no reason why they don't know why they're there. They don't love the major they're in. And they're like, oh, but I thought I was going to be happy once I got here, and I'm not.
Yeah.
And it's like literally all the things you just talked about is what
Yep.
they needed to be doing and thinking through. Just also living a well-balanced life, right? Like making sure, like when they're thinking about colleges, thinking about are there hiking trails if they like hiking, what food is around them. I know we just recently Googled all the Chipotle, so my son goes to Chipotle a lot,
Yeah.
and we're like, that those are the things you're gonna miss. So really thinking through socially what they're looking for, small school, big university, you know,
Right.
regionally, what you're looking at with weather. I'm sure you deal with a lot of that. So just,
Yeah, I mean, there's
yeah,
all those kinds of
yeah,
factors. I mean, you mentioned food. I kind of think about like, there are the South Asian kids I work with who go to schools that are entirely South Asian. And they're like, I'm comfortable. I'm at my best when I'm right within this community.
mm,
I want a school that has
yeah.
like a Bhangra team and the cafeteria serves Indian food. I may, great. Then you build your search around some of these things.
Interesting.
And there are
What are
other
some of the colleges that are like, is it UCI one of them? Because I went to
I
UCI.
mean, yes, the
Okay.
UCs in general
Yeah,
are
yeah,
doing a
yeah.
nice
Okay.
job. And,
Yeah.
Penn has a strong reputation for that,
Okay. Yeah.
Northwestern,
Oh, yeah. That's true.
But
Yeah.
then there are the other kids who are like, give me something different. My God, like please let me meet some Latino
Mhm.
students, some African Americans, some Jewish kids, and
Yeah.
then with a totally different experience, right? I mean, some of these are also things where you have to make decisions between
Mhm.
what I call our September decisions when you're building your list and applying
Yeah.
versus April decisions, where once you've gotten in, I would never want a kid to
Yeah.
pick a dorm based
Uh-huh.
on, or pick a school based on how nice the dorm is, right?
That's true.
Or
Yeah.
how good
Yeah.
the intramural program is. Because fundamentally, college is still school. I think the academic aspects are going to play a huge
Yeah.
role, along with
Yeah.
financial aspects and things of that
Yeah.
sort. So I think there's a lot of factors out
Mhm.
there. I think they should all be considered. But the ones that I think tend to weigh most, should be weighed most heavily, tend to
Mhm.
be around having a clear understanding of the academics that the
Okay.
student wants to take advantage of. If you
Mhm.
have always wanted to go study in France or Japan,
Yeah.
study abroad, don't apply to colleges that don't have that program. There are
That's true.
over
Yeah.
2,000 four-year universities. And if that is something
Yeah.
you've been dying to do, exit off, you'll find another. You're only going to apply to like 8 to 15
Hmm.
of them, right?
That's
Um,
true.
I think beyond the academics, it is a little bit about the kind of community that you're
Hmm.
looking for. I spoke to that around ethnic, religious
Yeah.
aspects, but then there's also just the environment. Like,
Hmm.
are you someone who prefers being in a small town? Do you love the idea of being able to go to like the local bookstore or coffee shop and have them know your name? Or if you're someone who, I grew up in a small rural farm town in Ohio. Part
Yeah.
of the reason Chicago drew me was like, I'd never seen such diversity.
Oh,
I
yeah.
wanted to be anonymous. I liked the fact that you could just walk for hours and hours and no one would know who you were. That was
Hmm.
incredibly exciting to me at that age,
Yeah.
right? And so I
Yeah.
think that factoring in that will let you start building a
Yeah.
smart list beyond just purely, the size of the school and what the average SAT is and,
Yes.
things of,
Yes.
things of that sort.
Wow. So yeah, so I think now like just shifting mindsets to thinking for parents, we are doing a disservice to our children if we are very narrowly focused on a narrow version of success, right? And so that's traditionally been what it is because as immigrants that came here, like parents are completely they're sacrificing everything for their child and they feel like they made it when their child gets into an Ivy League or that
Yeah.
prestige or that status.
Yeah.
And so it's going to take a lot of unlearning of like to be able to really put our children first and think about all the things you talked about. We're going to start doing things differently. And so are there things that you would recommend parents start to some of the conversations we just had, which is like why college, right? And so is there any other questions or things that, parents should consider talking
Yeah.
through with their children as they redefine
How many
success?
hours do
I
we have? I'd
know.
love, no. Yeah, I think one of the first things is keeping at the forefront. You
Hmm.
love your child.
Hmm.
However, it is incredible in this process to continue to think of them as a person, a young person, your
It
child,
is.
and
It
not
is.
a product.
Hmm.
I am horrified at times by the number of parents who kind of view this entire thing as a startup operation that you're looking to optimize every
Yeah.
single aspect of this product that's
Yeah.
your little baby. That's the wrong way to do it.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
really have to let go of that. I also think it's having that self-awareness to kind of not need the external validation of the people at your temple or your mosque or your church. I mean, that's a pretty adult thing. And
Hmm.
I'm disappointed sometimes with how many parents fail that.
Yeah.
Parents are the first people to say, if everyone else ran off the cliff, would you do the same thing? Well, then why are you doing it, parents? Right?
Yeah.
Like, let
Yeah.
your kid grow up to be who they are, meant to be. And, a lot of parents, again, they can view this as we're here to, your kid is not a resume to be written up, right? You're
Hmm.
really kind of a book and you're letting the chapters, the pages, kind of
Yeah.
unfold.
Yeah.
And it's your job to kind of like take them through that and help them understand these various pieces and parts
Hmm.
of their lives. And so I think it comes down, that there's these broader macro views, which I think a lot of parents, not just
Yeah.
India, I think it's an immigrant story to a
It
certain
is.
certain
Yeah.
extent,
Yeah.
you have a scarcity mindset and
Fear. There's
you
so much
know,
fear of the unknown, which I see where I live in Dublin. There's so much fear about
yeah,
just AI
yeah,
and
yeah, of course.
um,
And I think a lot of it has to come with just some simple twists in language, right?
mhm.
Hey, what were your grades this week? It's very different than what
Yeah.
did you learn this week,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
When you praise only the outcomes, you're
Yeah.
teaching your kid a certain something there, and it's
Mhm.
not a good thing that
Yeah.
you're teaching them at that age. I mean, outcomes certainly matter. I
Yeah.
mean, don't
Yeah.
don't don't get me wrong,
Mhm.
but it kids start forgetting why they're doing things, right? Like
Yeah.
I see it with the kids. This happens all the time around soccer here in Southern California, where I meet
Mhm.
these girls who are just outstanding soccer players. I'm like, well, I'm guessing you want to get play it in college. I'm
Mhm.
guessing you want to write your personal statement about it because you love it so much. You're so good at it. And they're like, I don't. It's kind of become, I loved it through ninth, 10th grade, but I have not been to a slumber party since 10th grade because they're always on weekends. And while
True.
all my friends are having fun, I'm at
Yeah.
travel club. I would rather be learning
Mhm.
Arabic,
Hmm.
learning how to, make stained glass windows. And here I am playing
Yeah.
soccer day after day. I'm living out my parents' dream or my parents' wishes, which are often attached to a resume, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Colleges themselves aren't obsessed with you playing varsity soccer for 4 years. They're just as impressed with you saying, you know what, I was pretty amazing at it,
Hmm.
but it wasn't something that I woke up excited to do every day. And I am excited to wake up every day and learn French. And that's how I spend
Hmm.
my time now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Amazing. I love the idea of you in my dorm, on my
Uh-huh.
soccer team, in my classroom, in my research lab, than the kid who's just like, tell me what to do and I'll do it.
I know. Yeah. And
Right? And
do you see kids that have like that are like this, like South Asian kids that have just lost motivation? Like you're working with them, but they don't know what they want to do, why they want to do it. Like when
I
you start
mean,
working with them, is this a
I
common thing
mean,
you're seeing?
without going into the
Yeah.
darkest of corners,
Yeah.
I see it in the statistics, certainly. I mean,
Yeah.
the suicide rate
Yeah.
amongst young
Hmm.
Asian people, both in high school and college, it's
Yeah.
higher than any other ethnic group in America. I
Yeah.
mean, we have to be honest and direct about that. And that starts with the parents, right? Having to
Yeah.
recognize what situations are they putting their children in and
Hmm.
how are they, helping them through that. And
Yeah.
certainly at an anecdotal level, I
Hmm.
speak at a number of conferences with South
Hmm.
Asian professionals, and I, speak in a number of communities and high schools that are predominantly South Asian. And yes, I absolutely
Hmm.
see versions of this taking place. I think there are small cracks appearing. You mentioned, the fear around AI and things of that sort,
Yes.
particularly in kind of the tech communities.
Hmm.
Um, I have some of the most successful cousins in the tech industry.
Yeah.
They are the first to be like, don't send your kid to computer science.
Yes.
Coding,
Yes.
don't need it, you know.
Uh-huh.
And they're very honest, and I think it makes people have to pause and go, well, how should we approach it? So I'm hoping that we're, with all
Hmm.
the kind of challenges in front of us, I'm hoping it's also kind of a little bit of a golden age where experts like you and me who are looking at the data, who are
Yeah.
looking at the research, who are living through these experiences, our advice is just as valued as the
Hmm.
random person who you saw
Yeah.
at the recent Bartnathium performance
Yeah.
who's like, here's what you have to do in order to get your kid into UCLA.
Wow.
Okay? I
Yeah.
think expertise still matters even in the day of,
Yeah.
Chat GPT.
Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think, yeah, you gave us a lot to think about when it comes to thinking about child's purpose, their identity, how they build their self-concept. Because I know, a lot of, and just going into just South Asian males, I know just the males in my life, they all were supposed to be doctors. They all ended up trying to figure out what they wanted to do later on in life, like as adults, as after having gone through their careers and realizing that they burn out later, like either you're burning out earlier, you're burning out later, but it's happening and you do a lot of work with Jiva mental health and so like how are you seeing this kind of play out the conversations with South Asian parents? Is it different for the boys than the girls? Is I would
Yeah.
assume that there's going to be a lot more pressure for the boys to be part of the STEM fields and be the
There are,
providers. Yeah.
and I think just listen, I think when it
Mhm.
sounds overly dramatic when you see those headlines that,
Yeah.
boys are in crisis, young men are in crisis, men are in crisis. But again, it's real. That's not saying
Yeah.
every single one is, of course.
Yeah.
But there are things that have happened in our culture over the last
Mhm.
5 to 25 years that have changed the way that like our
Yeah.
brains are wired and the way that we interact with each other. I mean, I am a fairly extroverted person, and even I'm
Mhm.
sometimes shocked. 5 years out of the pandemic,
Yeah.
I sometimes am at a loss of like, wait, how do I introduce myself? I used to be so good at just easing into a room and
Yeah.
chatting people, and now I'm like, what do I do?
Mhm.
And so I think, boys in particular, there's particular expectations that are heaped upon them, that
Yeah.
things come naturally to them to be leaders and to be providers. And that's not necessarily the case for
Yeah.
all of them, right? And I think
Mhm.
it's so important for like the adult men in their life to
Mhm.
be able to kind of, model vulnerability, to kind of
Yeah.
normalize
Mhm.
softness.
Mhm.
I love my dad
Mhm.
dearly,
Yeah.
but if I was ever a father, I don't I would want to have a different relationship. We have a
Yeah.
great relationship
Yeah.
now,
Uh-huh.
but I knew him as someone who purely provided. I didn't get to see the softer side of him until he's older, and he's
Yeah.
so fun and he's so creative. I
That's
never saw
awesome.
that. He was a surgeon who was going to work to help pay for college.
So how did he change like in your like later years?
I think part of it is also
Yeah.
just like as you grow, or I mean, I can't imagine what it's like to
Yeah.
be an immigrant moving to this country in the 70s,
That-
with a
Yeah. Yeah.
functional, handling of English and everything else. I
Uh-huh.
think it's also like parents always growing
Yeah.
up
Yeah.
as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
And then, I think like a lot of us, I think trauma affects us. My mom
True.
passing away changes the nature of
Yeah.
how he identifies himself.
Hmm.
And so I also think he's someone who's always read philosophy, right? We're not
Yeah.
particularly religious, but one of the things that I love about religion is it often gives people a shared language
Hmm.
to talk about like emotion and community, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so great, you can make your kids sing budgeons in a language they don't understand or have any sense of the meaning of, but if you
Hmm.
don't speak to the underlying
Yes.
purpose of those songs, it's fairly meaningless and honestly a waste of time,
Wow,
right?
yeah. Okay,
And
that was
so
deep just because, I grew up singing bhajans and didn't
I
understand.
did not.
So, okay, so every Sunday I was part of Bhamikas and Satya Sai Baba bhajans and
Yes.
again didn't have the meaning behind what I was doing. So,
Yes, yes. So I think
yeah.
those like, giving them that language about
Uh-huh.
emotions, there's this incredible thing called an emotion wheel. You could just Google
Yes.
emotion wheel, right? And
Uh-huh.
in this core of it, it's just like happy, sad, angry. And then
Mhm.
as you go out, you get the permutations. And
Yes.
I have a nephew who's heading into high school, and he's brilliant and hilarious.
Uh-huh.
But like a lot of boys, like he's jammed up a little bit about how to
Yeah.
talk about how he feels like
Yeah.
at the
Yeah.
moment.
Yeah.
And even just knowing that wheel and just getting to go, okay, well let's keep playing out. You're disappointed, but let's keep playing our way out the wheel and like, yeah, this is what I feel like, right? And I
Yeah.
think, I spoke about if I had a
Mhm.
magic wand, which I don't,
Mhm.
but if I did for high school boys, please read more.
Yeah.
Try writing creatively a
Yeah.
bit more.
Uh-huh.
Communication skills have just collapsed in particular with high school kids, but
Yeah.
boy, writing skills in particular have. ChatGPT, I think, can be a
Yes.
great tool and
Yeah.
assist,
Mhm.
but holy cow, you need to learn how to write on your
Yeah,
own. That's how
I'm
you
seeing the
express.
same thing. Yeah, yeah, I'm seeing the same thing. And I actually just presented the emotions wheel at the men's mental health club at Foothill High School. So I was
Love
at
it.
a high school. We talked about emotional granularity and
Yep.
how a lot of times with South Asian males, when they feel uncomfortable, it's like a pressure cooker goes off, anger goes off, right? Because they're not used to feeling emotion, so they don't like it, and then that's what happens.
Yeah.
So
And
it
I
is
think
so
part of
true.
it is like what you're doing right here, Dr. Shaw. I mean, just
Yeah,
having these conversations, it cracks things open. This now,
yeah,
someone's going to listen to this on a car ride
hmm,
on the way to a college visit.
yeah,
And you're going to have a son who goes, Dad, when you lost your mom 3 years ago, like
mhm,
I never saw you cry. Like, but all
yeah,
my white friends' dads were crying. How did you feel? That
yeah,
starts opening
yeah.
things up, right? That they start,
It's so important to
so
have those types of relationships with their dads and
yes,
for the dads to really think through how they want to be there for their children and open up
yes.
and do the work themselves because it
Yeah.
takes them
Yeah. This idea that
work.
being vulnerable is
Mhm.
weak
Yeah.
is absolutely bonkers.
Yeah, because it's like so brave and you need so much strength to be able to do it. Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah. I think a certain stoicism can be valuable in moving through life, particularly
Mhm.
in the moment we're in right now. You can't let yourself get wound up on every single little
Mhm.
bit of news or information you get.
Yeah.
But, broadly speaking, you have to be
Understanding
able
it,
to,
understanding what's happening within you, and then figuring out what to do with it. I feel like that's the whole point of emotional intelligence, and that's
yes,
how you get to your
yes.
goals and you
Oh,
get to what
yes.
you're curious about and interested about.
Yeah.
So, wow, I mean, you have shared so much. I wanted to just end with or finding out where listeners can really connect with you, find out more about your work, what you're doing right now.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I
Yeah.
mean, anyone who's interested in learning more about the work that I do, one-on-one with students and their parents, can go to my website, fatmango.com, fatmango.com. I do have a little explanation on the
Yeah.
website as to how we got to that name.
Uh-huh.
In particular, a lot of my focus. Listen, I have a lot of my kids who are
Mhm.
aiming for those Berkeleys and those Dukes and those
Yeah.
Princetons. But the joy I take is in that the outcomes
Yeah.
are a product of them really digging in and developing a clear sense of who they are and who they want to become, and
Hmm.
then us building things around that rather than here's a formula of X plus Y plus Z leads to this
Hmm.
outcome, right? And so there is a little, we do talk about the social emotional wheel. We talk about
Yeah.
language. I want kids to think about kindness and compassion. I want kids, kids often, parents often joke like, it's so weird. We met with some other education consultants. They all asked, what was your GPA and SAT score? And you were asking about what's their favorite movie and how many hours of sleep did you get last night?
Yes.
Right?
Sleep. Yes.
I will not work with kids who are getting less than 6 hours of sleep, and ideally less than seven, because I know that science tells us really they need to be getting 8 to 9.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
important for me to hold hard and fast to,
Mhm.
yeah, occasionally are they gonna be nice you only get 3 or 4? Sure, of course. This
Yeah.
is an important part of growing up, eating healthy. We talk about these
Mhm.
things. I try to model that for the young people I work with. I live a very active life.
Yes.
I couldn't do that without making sure I don't eat well and, stay hydrated and get plenty of sleep and, and like you said, balance. I think that's so critical for
So
success.
critical.
And unfortunately, the narrative is like around people like Steve Jobs who wore the same outfit for 20 years. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
okay, fine, there are those exceptions out
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
And if
Yeah.
your child is that exception, you don't need me or you
Mhm.
to guide you because your kid's just going to rock and roll.
Yeah. Yeah.
No one
Yeah.
told Steve Jobs that. He
Yeah.
just did it, right?
Yes, yes,
So,
yes. And that's also like, yeah, something that I feel like I'm working with my son on is just like what you're saying about the balance, just even now, because he's going to be leaving. And then, you see that a lot of times children are just so stressed, they're not getting their movement in, they're not getting, they forget about socialization or they socialize too much and they forget about their academics. And so
yes,
it's like
yes,
having that
yes.
checklist in your mind, like, did I get movement today? Did I eat a meal today? Did
Yeah, I mean,
I,
it's the small. I
yeah.
love like I have this young Indian woman who ended
Mhm.
up in an Ivy League, and I still keep in touch with some of my students. We had a Zoom, and she comes back like one day, like completely, like clearly had been working out, and I
Yeah, yeah.
was like, oh, I'm on the boxing team for my
Uh-huh.
university, and I was like, you box? She's like, oh, it's an incredible workout. I get
Wow.
so much out of it. That's what gets me
I have
going.
heard people love boxing. Yeah, I
I
have
was
some
like,
cousins that
wow.
box.
But
Yeah,
I also think about the mom a few years ago who, I often ask parents to, tell me what they enjoyed about their experience with me. And the
yeah,
mom was like, hey, listen, it's great you got her into, where did, oh, yes, she went to computer science,
yeah.
University of Washington. Super thrilled about that. But
Uh-huh.
you're the first person to get her to make her bed. And she's like, how'd you do that? I was like, well, I have to look at, she's in her desk and I have to look at her messy bedroom during the meeting. And I was like, that's just not a way to present yourself, right?
Yeah, and then
And
the
she's like,
happiest
what do
people
you
make their
mean? I
beds in
don't.
the morning. Yeah, yeah.
And I was like, you're gonna have job interviews. You're gonna have to like, have meetings,
Mhm.
and people are gonna be observing everything around you, right? This is all part of who you are. If you have a messy bed and I'm an employer, I'm sitting there thinking like, this was obviously in the midst of the pandemic.
Yeah,
Everything
yeah.
was online. And she was like, whoa, yes, I will make my bed before you. So
That's
there we are. I
great.
help kids get into college and clean up their rooms. So
Yes, you're doing it all. I can't thank you enough for all the incredible, valuable insights that you gave us here today. From working with hundreds of students and advising them, you were able to really dive deep into what we need to do as South Asian parents, as South Asian families, the conversations we need to have. I love this idea of the long game, redefining success. And having, boys really show that range of emotions that they feel and really helping connect them to that. Because
yeah,
that's the first step in helping them with self-concept and their interests,
yeah.
curiosities, and all of that.
And can I just
Yes.
add one last comment? I mean,
Mhm.
we're in this moment also we're like South Asians for better we're India, we're everywhere. Like
Yeah.
we're doing incredibly well in the
Uh,
world of journalism, in politics. So many
yeah.
of the great like novelists and poets,
Mhm.
sportscasters, even I mean, there's a Thummel dude who pitches for the Texas Rangers, right? Like
Oh.
anything is possible. Like I can look out, survey the land, and go, oh my God, brown people. And that wasn't true when I was a teenager. I
No,
had
yeah.
no vision of
Hmm.
who I could be other than the doctors and engineers who showed up at the Diwali party, right?
So
And
true,
now
yes.
everything is possible. So, like,
Mhm.
the best thing you can do for your kids is like encourage that mindset and let them take those skills and talents that they
Yeah.
have and really exploit those because good things are going to happen. The world is pretty open to them nowadays, and I hope that continues.
Yes, and that's just like it's so exciting because when you see this new generation, like I just took my daughter on a tour for KQED because she's part of something called Media Squad for Girl Scouts, and just talking to them and asking them questions about how did you guys get into this? And they were like, oh, they did internships, or like my daughter just got exposed to like broadcasting and journalism and things that I was telling my daughter, like I never thought this was something I could do. I didn't even think I could be a teacher because all I had was Caucasian teachers, you
Yes,
know?
yes,
And
yep,
so if you think you want to work with kids, you're going to be a pediatrician. That's what you
yep.
do. And so,
100%. I want to make the world a better place. Well,
yeah,
I want to
yeah,
help people. You can do it in ways
yeah.
more than becoming a doctor,
So it
right?
is really, really exciting. So I think if parents just tap into that, like that it's limitless and we will, based on what your interests are, what you're curious about, you guys will be able to accomplish a lot and live these happy, fulfilling lives. It's what we really want at the end.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I want to thank our listeners for tuning in to Brownish Parenting. Remember that success should never come at the cost of joy, connection, or your child's sense of self. Let's raise kids who are not just accomplished, but alive.